After receiving the invitation to sign a 33 million peso project, my son began to prepare his things to go to the airport. Shortly after, I discovered that my daughter-in-law was hiding something in her suitcase. I took advantage of her coming out and opened it. I froze. Silently, I put it back in her bag. 30 minutes later, the police arrived. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge. I want to know how far it has gone. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee spread throughout my small kitchen. Sergio, my son, came downstairs with his face lit up like the sun. He waved at me with a radiant smile. "Mom, today is an important day," he said excitedly. I smiled back. At the table, Camilla, my daughter-in-law, had already prepared breakfast. She smiled at me too, but her smile was tired, as if she had trouble maintaining it. "Mom, have breakfast. Mom, if this business goes well, I'm going to get promoted to assistant director. Can you imagine?" "Red Solar is going to expand all over Mexico," he said, laughing. His eyes shining. I nodded, feigning excitement. My gaze went to Camilla. She was silently packing Sergio's personal belongings into a small bag, her movements slow and her shoulders slumped. She didn't respond to her husband's enthusiasm, she didn't smile. Suddenly, Sergio's phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. He frowned, glanced quickly at the screen, and stood up. "I'm going outside to answer it," he said, walking toward the backyard and closing the glass door. I got up to get some water in the kitchen, but my eyes never left Camilla in the living room. She glanced toward the patio where Sergio was talking on the phone. Then, as if making sure no one was watching, she reached into her apron pocket. Her hand trembled as she pulled out a small package wrapped in white paper. My heart was pounding. Camilla looked around once more and quickly hid the package among the shirts in Sergio's suitcase. She smoothed out the fabric carefully, as if afraid of leaving a mark. When she was done, she straightened up, let out a long sigh, and went upstairs, muttering something about checking the bathroom. The glass of water in my hand was ice cold, but inside it was burning. Why would Camilla do something so furtive? I walked over to the suitcase, my heart pounding so hard I thought it was going to break. I looked toward the stairs. Camilla was still upstairs. I ran into the kitchen, grabbed the rubber dishwashing gloves, and put them on. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was a mother's instinct to protect her son. I went back into the living room, knelt down next to the suitcase, and carefully lifted the shirt. The package was hidden inside a rolled-up sock. My hands were shaking so much that I almost dropped it. I unfolded the paper and inside was a small Ziploc bag. I saw some white powder, a wad of new peso bills, and a fake ID card. The photo on the card was of Sergio. I felt like my blood was going to run cold. I couldn't breathe. These were things I had only seen in crime movies, but now they were in front of me, in my son's suitcase. If this was Camilla's doing, what did she intend? To hurt Sergio? Or was there some secret that I still didn't know? I looked at Camilla's beige purse hanging on the back of the sofa. Without thinking twice, I took the package, put it back in the Ziploc bag, and hid it in the inside compartment of the bag. Then I packed the clothes into Sergio's suitcase and closed the zipper with a click, as if nothing had happened. I took off my gloves and put them in my coat pocket. My heart was still beating hard. Just then, the doorbell rang loudly, breaking the silence of the house. I jumped. My glove almost fell from my hands. Camilla ran down from upstairs with a pale face and panic-stricken eyes. "Mom, who is it?" she asked in a shaky voice. I didn't answer, just walked toward the door trying to stay calm. 2 police officers were on the porch, one older with a friendly smile, the other younger with a notebook in his hand. "Excuse me for bothering you, Mrs. Alvarez," the older officer said in a calm voice. "We're just doing a routine patrol of the neighborhood. Is everything okay here?" I smiled, although inside I was uneasy. "Yes, everything is okay, thank you," I replied, trying to make my voice sound natural. They nodded. They greeted me and left. I closed the door and leaned my back against the wood, taking a deep breath to calm myself. But when I turned around, Camilla's eyes met mine. She looked at me silently, then turned around and tightened her grip on the handle of her bag. The silence that remained in the house after the police officers left was suffocating. I walked toward the living room and my gaze stopped at the wedding photo on the TV stand. In the image, Sergio and Camilla were smiling radiantly, holding hands in front of the church in Querétaro. I closed my eyes and let myself be carried away by the memories, by those days when happiness was still complete. I am Mercedes Alvarez, a retired literature professor. At 62 years old, I thought my little family was finally complete. My husband Javier died in a work accident when Sergio was just starting college. The day I received the news, I was paralyzed, holding his photo in the middle of the hospital. Since then, only Sergio and I remained, mother and son, supporting each other in this house. I worked tirelessly, teaching classes at night and saving every penny so that he could study. He was intelligent, ambitious, and he was always my pride and joy. Every time I got a scholarship, I would whisper to Javier's portrait, "See, my love, our son is incredible." I remember perfectly the day Sergio introduced me to Camilla. It was a clear autumn afternoon. Sergio entered holding the hand of a young woman with long, black hair and bright but shy eyes. "Mom, this is Camilla," he said proudly. Camilla looked down and greeted me with blushing cheeks. "Nice to meet you, ma'am," I said. "Mom," she said hesitantly, correcting herself immediately. I laughed and hugged her. "Call me Mom." "Okay." From that moment on, I loved her, not only because she made my son happy, but because her sincerity was evident in every gesture. Her wedding day was one of the most beautiful days of my life. The church in Querétaro was filled with golden light that streamed through the stained glass windows, casting reflections on the floor. Camilla entered in a white dress embroidered with lotus flowers, more beautiful than any bride I had ever seen. Sergio, elegant in his black suit, held her hand tightly. When he put the ring on her, I couldn't hold back my tears. I held Javier's photo and whispered, "Look, my love, our son has grown up, he has found a good woman." Camilla was wonderful. She had graduated with honors in accounting, but after getting married she decided to quit her job to dedicate herself to the home. I once asked her, "Aren't you sorry to leave a good job?" She smiled and replied sweetly, "I want to spend time with Sergio and you. Family is more important." Quote. I was moved, although I also felt a slight fear. Such a capable young woman would be truly happy staying home. Camilla adapted quickly to our life. She learned how to cook my favorite chicken soup, although the first time it was a little salty. And Sergio teased her by saying, "Do you want to raise Mom's blood pressure?" Camilla blushed and apologized, but I just laughed. "It's okay, next time I'll show you how to season it better." Those quiet nights were my treasure. The three of us would sit on the couch watching a comedy on TV. Sergio would put his feet up on the table. Camilla would rest her head on his shoulder and I would knit, laughing every now and then at some silly joke. Our laughter would fill the whole house. Once Camilla asked me, "Mom, do you think I look like the main character in the movie?" I laughed and pinched her cheek. "You're much more charming." Sergio chimed in, but just as clumsily. We all laughed, and at that moment I felt that our family was finally complete. But everything began to change about a year after the wedding, when the first signs appeared. Sergio started getting strange calls and would always go out onto the balcony to answer them. I would pretend to wash the dishes, but I would pay attention. He would speak quietly and sometimes laugh. A laugh I hadn't heard in a long time when he spoke to Camilla or me. "Yeah, okay. See you tonight," I heard him say in an animated tone before quickly hanging up and going back inside as if nothing had happened. I wanted to ask him, but every time I saw his eyes I kept telling myself, it must be work, nothing more. Then the last-minute overtime started to appear. The dinner Camilla had prepared with such care, the hot tamales, the pozole soup that had taken her all afternoon to cook, were getting cold on the table. Camilla would sit there, her silverware arranged next to her plate, staring at the door, waiting for Sergio. I once saw her wait until 9 at night without touching her food. "Eat first, don't hurt your stomach," I advised her in a soft voice. She just shook her head and smiled sadly. "I want to wait for him, Mom. Maybe he's busy." Sergio changed, not only in his behavior, but also in his appearance. He started taking better care of himself, buying expensive designer shirts, the kind he used to say were a waste of money. He changed his perfume, changing from the citrus scent Camilla liked to a strong, woody one, so penetrating that it made me frown every time he passed by. "Mom, the company is growing now. I have to look good," he explained when I asked him. I looked at Camilla, who lowered her head and clutched the edge of the tablecloth in her hands. She sensed something was happening, she knew it, but she didn't say anything. Camilla tried to keep him by her side, even if it was just small things. She cut her hair, now short and framing her face, which made her look younger. "Mom, do you think I look good like this?" she asked me one morning with hope in her voice. "Very pretty, daughter. I'm sure Sergio will love it," I replied cheerfully. She also began cooking more elaborate dishes like steak in red wine, which she learned by watching the same video dozens of times. But Sergio didn't seem to notice. One night, Camilla put on a new blue dress, stood in front of the mirror, and asked her husband, "Do you like how it looks on me?" Sergio looked up from his phone and replied without interest, "It's fine," and then went back to looking at the screen. Camilla's shoulders slumped and her smile faded. I was in the kitchen pretending to clean the table, but inside my soul ached. I wanted to say something, but I was afraid of making things worse. I started seeing her cry alone, not inside the house, but in the garden, where she usually watered the plants. Once I saw her among the rose bushes with the watering can in her hand as tears streamed down her cheeks. When she saw me, she quickly wiped them away and said with a forced smile, "Mom, dust got in my eyes." I didn't contradict her, I just nodded and patted her on the shoulder. But I knew she was crying because her heart was breaking. The night of their third wedding anniversary was the final straw. Camilla had been preparing all day. She went to the market early to buy fresh flowers and picked out the scented candles she knew Sergio liked. She said to me excitedly. I asked her to come early. "Mom, I want to surprise him." The table was decorated like a restaurant, with a spotless white tablecloth, red roses in the center, and the stew she had been cooking since noon. I looked at her and felt tenderness. At 10 at night, the door finally opened. Sergio came in unsteadily, smelling of alcohol and an unfamiliar perfume. He threw his tie on the couch, his eyes red. Camilla stood up abruptly from the table and said in a shaky voice, "Do you know what day it is?" Sergio frowned and groaned, "I'm tired, Camilla." "What do you do besides cook and complain all day at home imagining things?" Quote. His voice sounded cold, hard, as if he wanted to crush any effort she could muster. Camilla burst into tears, her hands clenching her dress. I couldn't stand it anymore. I went over and hugged her by the shoulders. "I'll talk to him, daughter. Men sometimes get stressed out by work. Don't be sad. But deep down I knew he was cheating on me. It clearly wasn't the job. The next morning I waited for Sergio in the kitchen when he came staggering downstairs looking for something to eat. I made him a glass of lemonade, put it in front of him, and said in a serious voice, "Sergio, you shouldn't talk to your wife like that. She spent the whole night preparing something for you." He interrupted me, annoyed. "Has she told Mom again?" "I told you, she's getting more and more unbearable." I froze, looking into his eyes, looking for the respectful son I once had, but I only saw a cold gaze full of contempt. "She's your wife, not a stranger," I said firmly. He looked at me without hesitation. "Mom, stay out of our business." Then he turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with a cold cup of coffee. The atmosphere in the house became heavy. Sergio and Camilla barely spoke to each other. Dinners, once a family affair, were reduced to the sound of silverware hitting cold, dull plates. Camilla ate in silence with her eyes downcast, while Sergio finished quickly, as if he just wanted to get away from the table. I, sitting between them, tried to start a conversation by talking about the weather or the food, but all I got were short answers. "It's delicious, Camilla," I said once, trying to break the ice. She nodded with a weak smile and continued eating. I glanced at Sergio, but he barely looked back without saying a word. A week later, Sergio came home earlier than usual, a rarity in those months. I was cleaning the living room when I heard the keys in the door. He came in with an animated expression, put a thick folder on the table, and said excitedly, "Mom, Camilla, I have good news." I stopped cleaning and looked at him. Camilla, who was washing vegetables in the kitchen, also stopped and looked at him with some curiosity. Sergio sat down, opened the folder of documents, and said proudly, "My company just received an invitation to go to Monterrey to sign a contract to build a solar power plant valued at more than 33 million pesos. If this deal goes through, I will be promoted to assistant director." He laughed loudly, slamming his hand on the table, as if the whole world were his oyster. I couldn't contain my joy. I patted him on the shoulder. "That's wonderful, Sergio. Luck is finally on your side. When you succeed, you'll have more time for your family, right?" I said hopefully, hoping that this opportunity would be the light that would help mend the rifts between him and Camilla. I looked at her, expecting a smile, a sign of enthusiasm, but Camilla didn't look happy. She put the chopsticks she was holding down on the table, her gaze fixed on Sergio, without a hint of warmth. A faint smile appeared on her lips, but it failed to hide the tension. "How long are you going away for?" she asked in a neutral voice, as if the question had nothing to do with Sergio's good news. I noticed something odd in her tone. It wasn't curiosity, it was distrust. Sergio frowned and replied shortly, "About 3 days, the meeting is on Friday." Camilla didn't say anything else, she just nodded and stood up silently, taking the plates to the kitchen, even though the meal wasn't finished yet. I watched her walk away with a heavy heart. That night I stayed in my room with the book open in my hands, but my mind was elsewhere. Suddenly, the shouts of an argument broke the silence of the house. I put the book down, walked slowly towards the hallway and opened the door a crack to hear better. Camilla's voice sounded full of suppressed rage, as if she had been keeping that inside for too long. "You're going with her, aren't you? There was no one else in the company who could go. Why did it have to be you?" I could hear the pain in her words, as if her heart was breaking in two. Sergio shouted furiously. "Are you crazy? This is a real business trip. Stop imagining things. You're destroying my career." Quote. Camilla was shaking, her voice trembling. "It's Luciana, right? Your new secretary. Don't think I don't know about those times when you said you were going to meet with a client, but in reality you were having lunch with her." I froze, my hand gripping the doorknob. Luciana, that name pierced my chest like a thorn. I remembered when I went to visit Sergio at the company and saw that young secretary with blonde hair and a sweet smile, but a cold gaze. She was always too kind to him, but distant with others. Could be. A loud bang resounded. Maybe the slam of a drawer being slammed shut. I was startled, took a step toward the door, intending to intervene, but stopped myself. I remembered Sergio's look of contempt the other day when he told me not to butt in. I lowered my hand with a heavy heart. I told myself it was just a couple arguing, that they would sort it out on their own. I lay down, but sleep would not come. Outside, the wind blew through the leaves, producing a constant murmur. I closed my eyes, praying that 33 million peso contract would be the opportunity for Sergio and Camila to meet again. Sergio's hurried voice from the living room pulled me from my thoughts about the fight the night before. "Mom, hurry up, the taxi is here," he shouted impatiently. I quickly put on my coat and got out. We arrived at the Querétaro airport in a tense atmosphere. Sergio was checking his phone nonstop, mumbling about meetings in Monterrey, without noticing Camila's unsettling silence. She was sitting in the back with me, tightly gripping the handle of her beige bag with a vacant stare. I glanced at her, but she lowered her head, avoiding my eyes. The airport was crowded and noisy. Announcements over the loudspeakers mingled with the voices of the passengers. Sergio quickly checked his luggage and took his black suitcase to the counter. The employee stuck the tag on and the suitcase disappeared down the conveyor belt. I stood a few steps away, my heart racing. I looked at Camila and saw her staring at the suitcase, biting her lip until it turned pale. She was worried because she thought the package was still inside, or she knew something I didn't want to take her to a corner and ask her. But Sergio came back and gave me a pass to the lounge. VIP. "Mom and Camila, come in and have a seat. I'm going to get a few things," he said in a calm voice before walking away. Camila and I passed through security without saying a word. I tried to start a conversation. "Do you want me to buy you some water, daughter?" She shook her head softly. "No, thank you, Mom." The silence between us grew increasingly heavy. Suddenly, a cold, firm voice echoed throughout the airport. "Urgent notice. Due to a security alert, all passengers are requested to remain in their seats. The security team will be conducting an emergency search. We appreciate your cooperation." A murmur spread through the crowd. I felt my heart pounding uncontrollably. I looked at Camila and saw her standing still, clutching her bag so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Sweat beaded on her forehead and her eyes showed pure terror. A team of police officers along with 2 large sniffer dogs entered the security area. Their barking echoed, making the atmosphere even more tenser. Passengers were forced to line up and I saw Sergio, who had just returned with a bottle of water in his hand, being stopped by an officer. "Good morning, please allow us to check your carry-on luggage," the policeman said in a calm but firm voice. Sergio nodded, handing over his leather briefcase with a calm expression. The officer opened it, checked the laptop, the documents and then nodded, handing it back. "Thank you," he said before walking away. I sighed in relief, thinking that luckily Sergio's suitcase had already gone through the belt and no one had searched it. But then one of the dogs stopped right in front of Camila, sniffed the air and began barking loudly directly at her beige bag. All eyes in the area turned to us. I felt my blood run cold. I had switched the package to Camila's bag, but I never imagined that it would lead to this moment. Camila took a step back, stuttering. "No, there's nothing there." But the panic in her eyes gave her away. The policeman approached with the dog in a serious tone. "Miss, Please let us search your bag. Another officer stepped forward, gesturing for Camilla to hand it over. Camilla was shaking, slowly touching the clasp as if trying to buy time. The officer opened the bag, took out a wallet, lipstick, a key ring and stopped. She pulled out a package wrapped in white paper. Opened it, revealing a hermetically sealed bag with white powder, wads of cash, and a fake ID. People around me began to murmur. Some pulled out their phones to record or take pictures. Camilla screamed in a broken, terrified voice. No, that's not mine. I don't know where it came from. But the police officers had already restrained her, and the metallic sound of handcuffs resounded sharply amidst the general silence. I froze, paralyzed, as a wave of guilt and fear enveloped me. Sergio, a few steps away, was pale. His gaze darted between the package in the officer's hands and Camilla, who was being escorted away. He looked at me as if searching for an explanation, but I just lowered my head. Sergio pulled out his phone, his voice shaking. Hello, I'm Sergio Alvarez. I have to cancel my flight to Monterrey. My family has an emergency. His voice broke as if he himself didn't understand what was happening. I remained in the midst of the chaos, consumed by guilt and fear. The news of the arrest at the airport spread like wildfire. That same night, news portals ran the headline, "Wife of young Red Solar director arrested for possession of illegal substances and falsified documents." Red Solar's stock plummeted overnight. The 33 million peso project that Sergio had pinned all his hopes on was suspended by his investment partner. His office phone rang non-stop, but Sergio didn't answer. He locked himself in his office with the door closed, the only sound being the banging of furniture. I stood outside, my hand on the doorknob, wanting to knock but afraid of finding a Sergio I wouldn't recognize anymore. Finally, I went to the kitchen and made him a cup of ginger tea, like I used to make for him when he was nervous since he was a child. I knocked softly on the door. "Sergio, son, I brought you some tea." He opened the door. His eyes were red and his hair was disheveled. He slumped into his chair, holding his head. "Why her, Mom? Why did she have to do this to me?" His voice shook, a mix of pain and rage. I placed the cup in front of him, took a deep breath, and sat down. I knew the time had come to tell the truth, even if it might make him hate Camilla even more. I began to speak slowly, each word weighing on me. "I saw Camilla put a package in your suitcase. This morning I put on gloves, opened it, and found a bag with white powder, money, and a fake ID with another name. But your photo." I stopped, looking him in the eyes, waiting for his reaction. He raised his head. His gaze went from surprise to fury. "She dared." He roared, hitting the table hard, making the cup shake. "She dared do this to me?" I continued, my voice shaking. "I don't know why she did it, but I couldn't let you take that package on the plane. I transferred it to her bag just before the police arrived." Sergio looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief, but his anger ended up getting the better of him. "She deserves it," he shouted, standing up and pacing back and forth. "She wanted to destroy me, to ruin my career." I watched him, consumed by rage, while the weight on my chest grew heavier. His anger worried me. He didn't wonder why Camilla would do something like that, or if there was an ulterior motive. He just believed that she had betrayed him. That same night I heard him call his lawyer in a cold voice. "Immediately draft a unilateral divorce petition. Reason: my wife's behavior has seriously damaged my reputation and my career." I was on the other side of the door, listening to every word, while guilt pierced me like a knife. I had brought Camilla to this situation, but I couldn't understand what had led her to do something like this. A girl as sweet as Camilla, why would she do it? The following days I couldn't sleep well. The images of Camilla watering the plants in the garden, the meals she prepared with such care, her sweet smile when she spoke of Sergio, all appeared with painful clarity. A girl like that, how could she do something so terrible? I wondered if perhaps I had been too impulsive in switching the packages. Was there something else behind it that I didn't know about? My initial anger towards Camilla began to turn into confusion. I decided that I had to see her. I had to hear the truth from her own mouth. I went to the detention center on a gray morning with the sky covered in heavy clouds. I sat across from Camilla, separated by a thick glass. I barely recognized her. She was emaciated, with puffy eyes and her once shiny hair, now dull and messily tied back. She looked at me without rancor, only with a hopelessness that broke my heart. "Camilla," I said hoarsely, "why did you do that?" I asked directly, without beating around the bush, because I knew that the visiting time was short. Camilla lowered her head, clasped her hands together, and began to cry. Her voice trembled. "Mom, I know he didn't go to Monterrey for work. He went with that secretary, Luciana. I overheard when he booked 2 plane tickets, 2 connecting rooms at the hotel." Tears streamed down my cheeks. I just wanted to ruin that trip, for him to lose the contract and stay home. A friend told me that if I put some flour and fake documents in his luggage, airport security would hold him for a few hours to investigate. I didn't know it was a real banned substance. I swear, Mom. I just wanted my husband to stay with me. I froze. Camilla's words were like a knife piercing my heart. The stone of guilt inside me shattered into 1,000 pieces. Then I understood that she wasn't the first one to betray me. The real cause of this tragedy was Sergio, the son I had loved and protected my entire life. I remembered his secret calls, the smell of someone else's perfume on his clothes, the times he would show up late saying he had extra meetings. I chose not to believe those signs. I lied to myself thinking it was all because of work. But now with the truth in front of me, I felt like I had lost my whole world. I looked at Camilla and wanted to apologize, but the voice I broke down. "Daughter," I stammered, but she just shook her head and smiled sadly. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take responsibility for what I did." Her voice was weak but firm. When the visit was over, I saw her walk away escorted by the guards and I felt my soul being torn apart. The days of waiting until the trial seemed endless. Sergio didn't seem to care about Camilla at all. He locked himself in his office making calls to save the Red Solar Company. The shares were plummeting and the 33 million peso project, which was his great hope, had been suspended by the partners. But instead of worrying about his wife, he only thought about the divorce. "She doesn't deserve to be with me," he once told me in a cold voice, as if Camilla were a stranger. I looked into his eyes, trying to find the loving son I had raised, but I saw only a man blinded by pride and rage. I couldn't stand idly by. I used all my retirement savings, the money I had saved for years, to hire a good lawyer for Camilla. I found him in a small office in downtown Querétaro and told him the whole truth, that I had switched the packages, that Sergio had deceived her, and that Camilla had only acted out of desperation. "Ma'am," the lawyer said in a serious voice, shaking his head. "A good intention does not justify a crime. The amount of substance found is too great. We can only ask for a reduced sentence." I nodded with a heavy heart. I knew the chances of saving Camilla were minimal, but I had to do it if only to redeem myself. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was cold and solemn, with white walls and hard wooden benches. I sat in the family area next to Sergio. She was dressed in an expensive suit, her face impassive, never once glancing at Camilla. She stood on the stand in a baggy prison uniform, small and wasted, her hair tied back loosely, her eyes sunken, but she stood tall, clinging to her last dignity. The prosecutor presented the evidence with relentless precision: the bag of white powder, the wads of cash, the fake ID in the name of Ricardo Mendoza, and the testimony of the airport police. Each piece of evidence was a stab in my heart. Camilla's lawyer tried to defend her, explaining that she acted under an emotional crisis caused by her husband's betrayal. "Your Honor, my client only wanted to keep her husband, not commit a serious crime," she said in a firm voice. But the judge only shook his head, his expression impassive. "Personal intentions do not justify a violation of the law," she replied. The trial was swift and merciless. The judge struck the gavel and his voice resonated. Camila Torres was sentenced to 7 years in prison for illegal possession and transportation of prohibited substances. The sound of the gavel was like an axe blow that cut off all hope. Sergio's divorce was also approved at that very moment, like a cold end to a marriage that was once full of love. Camila did not cry, she just closed her eyes, her shoulders shaking as if she were trying not to collapse. When the police took her, they passed in front of us. Her gaze met Sergio's, now without love, only emptiness. Sergio stood there with his arms crossed and his face impassive. When Camila disappeared from view, he turned to me with a mocking smile and muttered, "Serves you right for being a traitor." That sentence was like a spark that ignited the powder keg inside me. All the restraint, the pain and the rage exploded. I couldn't take it anymore. Right in front of the courtroom, among the reporters still holding cameras and microphones, I turned to Sergio with a shaking hand and slapped him with all my might. The sharp sound resounded and everyone around us froze. "Traitor!" I shouted, my voice breaking with anger and pain. Who was the first to betray Sergio? If you hadn't been unfaithful, if you hadn't despised and trampled Camilla's love, she wouldn't have ended up like this. You caused this whole tragedy and you still dare to laugh. The crowd fell silent. Only the clicking of the cameras could be heard. Sergio, stunned, touched his reddened cheek and looked at me as if I were a stranger. He roared, "You're blind, Mom. You're defending a criminal instead of your own son. Luciana is the only one who understands me and deserves to be by my side." When I heard Luciana's name, I felt nothing but revulsion. I looked him straight in the eyes with an icy voice. "If you dare bring that woman into this house, the house your father built with his sweat, consider yourself motherless. From now on, don't call me Mom." I turned around and walked away, ignoring Sergio's furious shouts and the curious looks of the people. As I imagined, Sergio showed no remorse. A few days after the trial, I heard the sound of his suitcase being dragged down the hallway. I stood there, watching his silhouette walk through the front door without a word. On the table, he left a hastily written note. "I will show you that my decision was the right one." I took the piece of paper with trembling hands, my heart breaking. I went into his room and began to sort through what was left. The photos of him and Camilla, the happy moments that I cherished so much, I put them in an old wooden box, locked it, and put it in the corner of the closet. I knew Sergio must have stooped to open his eyes. It wasn't long before I saw him on the news. Sergio held a lavish press conference at a luxury hotel in downtown Querétaro. Dressed in an expensive suit, he stood in front of dozens of microphones and declared in a confident voice, "I have finalized my divorce and fired several disloyal employees. Red Solar will continue to grow stronger than ever." Quote. Then he introduced his fiancée Luciana Morales, his young secretary with blonde hair and a radiant smile. She clung to his arm, her lips painted in a smile that I only saw as calculation. Sitting in front of the television, I gripped the remote control tightly, my heart heavy. I remembered the times I went to the company to visit Sergio. Luciana was always sweet to him, but haughty and cold with the other employees. I never imagined that she would go to the extreme of showing herself publicly with Sergio so soon after Camilla's conviction. Sergio began living a life of luxury, as if to show that he needed no one but Luciana. I heard the neighbors whisper that he bought her an expensive car, designer handbags, and that he took her on trips to places he used to call only for special occasions. I saw the photos in the newspapers of Sergio and Luciana smiling in a fancy restaurant, and I felt my heart clench. I thought of Camilla, sitting in a cell, and wondered how my son could be so blind. To compensate for the losses of the $33 million Project Pesos, Sergio launched himself into risky investments, ignoring the advice of his older partners. "Neighbor, Sergio's company is full of debts," Mrs. Rosa told me one morning at the market. I just nodded, trying to hide the concern growing inside me. The punishment came faster than I imagined. One morning, as I was making coffee, my phone vibrated with a news alert. The front page headline screamed Solar Network Director Sergio Alvarez under investigation for financial fraud and stock manipulation. A partner accuses him of swindling him, and I stood there with trembling hands. The rate almost dropped. The article revealed something even worse. Luciana Morales had disappeared, taking all the money from the company's reserve fund. It was said that she had run off with Sergio's biggest competitor. I sank into my chair between pain and rage. He had warned me, but he wouldn't listen. Now his arrogance and blindness had led him to this end. That night the rain was pouring down. The drops beat hard on the windows as if they wanted to tear apart the silence of the house. I was knitting on the couch to chase away my heavy thoughts when I heard a faint knock on the door. I got up with a slight uneasiness in my chest. When I opened it, I saw Sergio standing there, soaking wet. He was no longer the elegant director he had been before. Gesso. His wrinkled suit clung to his body, his hair disheveled, his face drawn and exhausted. His eyes were red, full of despair and regret. I stood there, not knowing what to say. I just looked at the son I had loved all my life. Then Sergio knelt down under the portico, in the cold rain. Quote, "Mom, I've lost everything," he said in a broken, trembling voice, like a lost child. Seeing him kneeling in the rain, my heart sank, but I knew it was not the time to soften. I didn't run to hug him. I didn't console him like I had when he was a child. I just opened the door wider and said in a calm but cold voice, "Come in, you're going to catch a cold." Sergio looked up with puffy eyes and entered silently. Water dripped from his clothes onto the wooden floor, leaving long, dark trails. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of hot ginger tea, as I used to do whenever Sergio was going through a bad time. The scent of ginger filled the room, but it didn't dispel the chill I felt inside. I placed the cup in front of him and sat on the chair across from him, waiting in silence. I wanted to listen to him, to know what he had understood after everything that had happened. Sergio, trembling, took the cup and the heat seemed to calm him down a bit. With the sound of the rain in the background, he began to speak in a hoarse, halting voice, as if each word was hard to come out of his soul. "Luciana, she was never honest, Mom," Sergio said, looking at the cup. "Every time she talked about getting married, she changed the subject. She would say that we needed more time or that my career was the most important thing now." He paused for a moment, gripping the cup tightly, holding back his anger. "She encouraged me to make risky investments, promising huge profits. I believed her, Mom. I thought she wanted the best for me, but it was all a trap set by my business rivals." He recounted in a shaky voice what happened that morning. "I woke up in the penthouse I had rented for her. The closet was empty, the safe was open, and the company account was empty. Luciana had taken Red Solar's entire reserve fund and disappeared with my biggest competitor." Sergio lowered his head, his shoulders shaking. "I have been suspended from my position. I am under investigation for fraud. My partners have turned their backs on me. My friends have distanced themselves. The house I was renting, the car I was paying for, everything is about to be seized. I am in debt up to my neck, Mom. I lost everything." He looked at me with tearful eyes, desperate and remorseful. Now I understand, Mom. Now I understand how much Camilla cared about me, really. He began to remember the little details, as if Camilla's memories were coming back one by one, painful but clear. She knew what I liked to eat and what I didn't. She ironed my shirts every morning with care, without a single wrinkle. When I was sick, she would spend the whole night by my side, taking care of me without complaining. She always gave herself completely to the family. She was sweet, she never reproached me for anything. Sergio rested his forehead on the table and began to cry like a child. And I treated her so badly. I doubted her, I trampled on her love, I sent her to prison, I destroyed her life, I destroyed mine. Her holes filled the kitchen, mixing with the sound of the rain, like a sad melody without end. I let him cry for a long time without interrupting him. When his crying calmed down, I put my gentle but firm hand on his shoulder. I didn't console him with empty phrases, I didn't caress him like I had when he was little. I looked him in the eyes and said in a calm but firm voice, "Tears don't solve anything, Sergio. You burned your own house down. Now you'll have to clean up the ashes." I paused, letting my words sink in. Take this as a life lesson so that you learn to be responsible for yourself and others. Life doesn't let you pull on the thread of experience too many times. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the rain that continued to fall without ceasing. Get up, I told him firmly. Start over with what you still have, your health and this house. I don't promise it will be easy, but I will be here whenever you truly want to make up for your mistakes. Sergio looked up, his eyes still wet, but something different shone in them, a small spark of hope, a weak light amidst the storm. He nodded without saying a word. He took the cup and took a sip as if trying to regain his strength. Many years have passed since that night of torrential rain. This house, which once witnessed the painful cracks in my family, is now slowly filling with light again. I heard that Camilla had been pardoned and released from prison early for good behavior. The day she got out, I went to greet her. I stood in front of the prison gate with my heart beating like that of a mother waiting for her daughter to return. When the iron gate opened, I saw Camilla coming out. She was no longer the innocent girl she had been before. She was thinner, her face hardened, and her eyes bore the invisible scars of the difficult years. But when she saw me, a faint smile played on her lips, as if she had found some of the warmth of family again. Camilla came to my house that afternoon, not to see Sergio, but to see me. She lowered her head, greeted me, and placed a small box of tea in my hands. Her voice trembled as she said, "Thank you, Mom, for not abandoning me all this time." I looked into her eyes and saw sincerity, and also a pain that still had not gone away. During the years Camilla was in prison, I visited her frequently, bringing her her favorite foods and the books she used to read with me. I wanted her to know that, although I had made mistakes, I never stopped seeing her as a daughter. "You don't have to thank me," I said, taking her hands. "Now you're rough from work. I'm the one who owes you an apology." Camilla told me she was leaving Querétaro for a small town in the south to start over. "I want a quiet life, Mom. No noise, no complications," she said, her eyes shining as she spoke of the future. I nodded and squeezed her hands. "You don't owe anyone anything anymore, Camilla. Live in peace, be happy, you deserve it." Quote, we hugged for the last time. A long hug, full of understanding and forgiveness. When she walked away and her figure disappeared at the end of the road, I knew she would be okay, that she had found the strength to rise from the ruins. Sergio never saw Camilla again. When I asked him, he just lowered his head and mumbled, "I have no right, Mom." Since that rainy night, Sergio has changed. He sold everything he had left, his apartment and his car on credit, to pay off his debts. He started from scratch as an ordinary employee in a small business. Gone were the expensive suits and arrogant words. Instead, I watched him tend the garden that his father Javier had loved so much. He pruned the trees, watered the flowers, fixed broken things in the house. Simple tasks that I had previously considered a waste of time. Every night he had dinner with me. We didn't talk much about the past, only about everyday things, the weather, the food, or some comedy movie on TV. In those moments, I saw again the loving son I remembered, although now he bore the scars of his mistakes. Once, while we were eating dinner, Sergio put down his cutlery, looked at me, and said, "I've thought a lot about what you told me, Mom, about rising from the ashes. I'll try, not to prove anything, but to truly live." I smiled and nodded with a warm heart. It was the first time in years that I felt that my son had truly matured. Over time, Sergio and some friends opened a small clean energy consulting company. It wasn't as big or ambitious as Red Solar, but each step was steady. He would often tell me about his new projects with excitement but without arrogance. "Mom, I'll do it right this time," he once said as he showed me a small but meaningful contract. I looked at him and saw that light in his eyes again, not the light of blind ambition, but of someone finding their way. Early one morning, I made a cup of coffee and went out onto the porch to look at the freshly watered garden after a rainy night. The sun was just starting to come up, and the drops on the leaves sparkled like diamonds. I saw Sergio in a corner of the garden, focused on pruning some rose bushes, his old shirt stained with dirt. I took a sip of coffee and felt light in my soul, as if all burdens had dissolved with the rain. I thought about my family's long journey. I once believed that putting that package in Camilla's bag was a way of protecting Sergio, an act of revenge, because I thought she had betrayed him, but then I understood that revenge almost destroyed everything. Quote, "Revenge only makes it hurt more," I thought as I watched Sergio smile next to a freshly bloomed rose. Only forgiveness, forgiving the mistakes of others and forgiving our own blindness, can bring true peace to the soul. The story you just heard has changed names and places to protect the identities of the people involved. We do not tell it to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and reflect. How many mothers suffer in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face everything to recover your voice? I want to know your opinion, because each story can be a candle that lights the path of another. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Now, on the final screen, I will leave you with two of the most beloved stories on the channel. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this point.